Chapter 1073. From the bottom of his heart, Li Yi actually did not want to persuade someone to be an emperor. This was the minister appointed by the late emperor of Wu Kingdom to entrust the orphan to him. He was the former prime minister, Old Wang. Through the deeds of the eldest princess of the Jing Kingdom in charge of politics, and coincidentally, he met the emperor of the Jing Kingdom in Shuzhou, who looked the least like an emperor. After suffering a double blow both mentally and physically, he brainstormed for a while before coming up with this unprecedented idea that would shock the heavens and the earth and make the gods cry. Li Yi could swear to God that he had no part in this process. What was more coincidental was that it was Yang Liuqing who wanted to overthrow the tyranny of the Wu Kingdom, establish a new regime, and liberate the poor people of the Wu Kingdom. Who was Yang Liuqing? He was Mississippi Lu's disciple, the only disciple, and his blood relative. Who was Mississippi Lu? She was Lu Rui, his sister-in-law, the only sister-in-law, and his blood relative. He and Rui were of the same generation, so Yang Liuqing was his martial nephew, the only martial nephew, and his blood relative. Could he just watch as his own disciple sent himself to his death, and cause Rui to sink into pain and sorrow every time she thought of her disciple? Obviously not. Moreover, Shanning had sprained her ankle, and he had to take revenge. Li Yi decided to go back to his room and take out the proposal that he had been saving up for a while to refer to it. It was originally tailor-made for Mingzu, but due to various reasons, it could only be put aside permanently. Li Yi had thought that he would never need it again in this life, but he did not expect that it could be put to use so soon. Although Mingzu and Yang Liuqing had the same ultimate goal, they had different starting points, different circumstances, and completely different paths to take. One was a gentle replacement, while the other was a violent revolution. However, there were some similarities between them. It was a pity that Mingzu did not come this time. Otherwise, she could have exchanged insights with Yang Liuqing. After all, she was his senior. Speaking of Mingzu, he really missed her. He didn't know if she had gained weight or lost weight. He also didn't know if she drank soup often. He also didn't know if she missed him and his egg-fried rice. Li Yi sighed. In fact, he should go back to the capital to have a look. But Li Mu was only a few months old and couldn't stand the long journey. What's more, he had something important to do soon. After being idle for so long, his hands were really itching. The blood in his chest that had been cold for a long time seemed to have a tendency to heat up again. Which area should he start from? While Li Yi was deep in thought, a figure walked past him. He raised his head, thought for a moment, then waved his hand and said, "Su Jing, come here for a moment." Li Xian was very regretful. He really wanted to see how Yang Liuqing would rebel. If possible, he even wanted to participate personally and fire the first shot of the revolutionary uprising. But they had stayed in Shuzhou for a few months. It had been more than half a year since he left the capital. There had never been an emperor like him. Many courtiers had already expressed strong dissatisfaction with this. There had also been a certain degree of instability in the capital. Moreover, he couldn't abandon his wife and children to wander outside. They were going back. Li Yi carried Shanning on his back and walked on the street. Her feet hadn't fully recovered, and it was inconvenient for her to walk with a cane. So during this period of time, Li Yi was her legs. Shuzhou should have become the largest commodity trading center in the Jing Kingdom and even in the surrounding countries. In a small Yong county, they could buy the specialties of each country. They were going to leave tomorrow. Li Yi specially took her out to buy things today. Just the number of guards following behind to take the items was already more than 10. Bai Su followed by his side. She was Shanning's personal bodyguard. These days, she was inseparable from her, so naturally, she was inseparable from Li Yi. Luckily the enmity and grudges between them had already vanished into thin air along with that piece of secret prescription. This young Miss Bai's attitude towards him was much better, and occasionally she would even smile at him, which made Li Yi feel overwhelmed by the favor. He even felt that Bai Su's previous sexual orientation was different from other women because she felt too inferior in some areas, so she had a rebellious mentality. Because her foundation was too weak, she could have obvious results in a short period of time. This directly caused her confidence to soar. Perhaps she could reverse this mentality. From the bottom of his heart, he still hoped that Bai Su could be a normal woman. It was good to be a woman. Shanning was a little quiet today. She lay on his back without saying a word. She was completely different from the past when she always had endless things to say. She didn't say a word, as if she had something on her mind. Whenever she was unhappy, Li Yi would always try his best to make her happy. However, today was different. She could stay here for another month or two in a self-harming way, but no more. A woman walked past them with a child. The child, who was about 4 or 5 years old, looked at the rows of sugar figurines on the street. He tugged at the woman's sleeve and asked, "Mother, what are these?" The woman looked back and said with a smile, "These are sugar figurines." The child looked at the sugar figurines in the shape of animals. His throat moved, and he asked, "Can these sugar figurines be eaten?" The woman smiled and walked forward to ask the old man blowing the sugar figurines, "Old man, can these sugar figurines be eaten?" Seeing his mother walk to the stall, the child's face lit up with joy. His eyes seemed to be shining. When the old man saw that there was a customer, he immediately nodded and said, "Yes. Madam, how many do you want?" "It's only 2 copper coins each." The woman turned back and stroked the child's head. She said, "Did you hear that? Grandpa said it can be." With that said, she held the child's hand and disappeared into the vast crowd. Shanning, who was lying on Li Yi's back, finally laughed. "Ha, sir, did you see that?" That child was almost crying when he left. She wrapped her arms around Li Yi's neck and said, "Sir, I want to eat sugar figurines." She still remembered that the day before her husband left 2 years ago, he had bought her a lot of sugar figurines. She had not eaten them since then. Later, the old man who sold sugar figurines in the capital passed away. This was the first time she had seen sugar figurines since then. When Li Yi walked over, the old man got up from his chair and asked, "Sir, do you want sugar figurines? Do you want to blow them or draw them?" "The blowing ones are 5 copper coins, and the drawing ones are 2 copper coins." Li Yi thought for a moment and asked, "Can I blow one myself?" The sugar figurines that Shanning and the rest had eaten in the past were all drawn. This kind of sugar figurine was usually used to eat. It was more difficult to blow a sugar figurine, but the shape was 3-dimensional and more aesthetically pleasing. The old man smiled and said, "Sir, don't underestimate these little sugar figurines. Even the simplest shape is not something that ordinary people can blow. Without years or decades of practice, you can't blow it well." Li Yi smiled and did not say anything. Although his library did not have much of a presence, it had never dropped the ball at critical moments. To think that he knew about astronomy, geography, elliptic hyperbola, hybrid biosphere, satellites in the sky, and submarines in the sea. How could a mere sugar figurine stump him? Although there was no book that taught him how to blow a sugar figurine, it was ultimately an art. Just like calligraphy and painting, they were different routes to the same goal. With the addition of body and breath control, how could a dignified expert on the heaven list not be able to do these? Under the old man's doubtful gaze, he washed his hands, took out a small piece of sugar paste, and skillfully pulled out a candy stick. At this moment, the old man's eyes were already filled with surprise. Shanning's eyes also lit up. As he blew, he pinched the sugar figurine with his hands. Soon, a simple figure appeared in his hands. The surprise in the old man's eyes had already turned into shock. The difficulty of blowing a person and blowing an animal were worlds apart. If he had not been immersed in this for decades, it would be impossible for him to be so proficient. Even if this young man had started practicing since he was in his mother's womb, it would still be impossible. This. He looked at the young man's rapidly changing hand gestures, and his body suddenly trembled. He suddenly looked at the girl on his back and cried out involuntarily, This is incredible, incredible," although it was just a sugar figurine. From the sugar figurine's figure, hairstyle, and slightly blurred eyebrows, it could be seen at a glance that the person he was blowing was the girl on his back. In addition to being shocked, the old man suddenly became vigilant. If the young people nowadays were all so powerful, his rice bowl would be ruined, sir. Shawnee hugged Li Yi's neck tightly, her face full of a blissful smile. "Cough, be gentle, I can't breathe." Li Yi stuck the sugar figurine on a bamboo stick and handed it to her, saying, "This is for you." Bai Su looked at the happy and satisfied girl, and then looked at Li Yi. She finally understood why there were so many mistresses in the imperial residence. She did not know how many women he had tricked with this method. For a young girl like her who had not seen the world, this kind of trick was the most attractive. Even the chief that she admired the most was tricked by him using some unknown method. And Senior Rui was a grandmaster, and he could even trick a grandmaster. She must be more careful in the future. Beast! She looked at the beautiful girl on his back and the lifelike sugar figurine in her hands. She secretly spat in her heart, "If you have the ability, blow one for her too." Chapter 1074. After blowing a candy figure for Shawnee, Li Yi noticed that Bai Su was looking at him strangely. It was as if she was looking at a beast. He thought to himself, even if her breasts become bigger in the future, she will still be as narrow-minded as before. It's just that I gave it to Shawnee and not her, so he blew another candy figure for her. It was a big-breasted woman with the same beautiful meaning and blessing. When the old man who sold the candy figure found out that Li Yi was not in the same trade as the one who blew the candy figure, he was obviously in high spirits. He insisted that he did not take his money. It was only a few copper coins, so Li Yi did not insist. Shawnee held the candy figure in her hand. She could not bear to eat it until they returned home. Bai Su could not bear to eat it either. She looked at the candy figure in her hand enviously. Li Yi placed Shawnee on the bed in the room and asked, "What do you want to eat today? I will make it for you." She counted with her fingers and said, "I want to eat spicy prawns, steamed fish, braised pork ribs, and sir's soup." Tomorrow, she and Li Xian would set off for the capital. Before that, Li Yi would fulfill all her requests. When Li Yi walked out of the room, Shawnee sat on the bed for a while before jumping off. She put on her shoes and looked around the room. After a while, she found a brocade box and carefully placed the candy figure in it. Bai Su stood outside the door and looked at the candy figure in her hand for a long time. A trace of jealousy appeared on her face. She bit off the candy figure's breast. "I will be back," said Li Xian solemnly as he stood at the entrance of the prince's mansion. The fringe was a good place, especially the secret base that Li Yi had built there. In the past, the place he wanted to stay the most was the Academy of Sciences. But now, the Academy of Sciences was second to him. He looked at Li Yi and asked, "Where is Shawnee?" Bai Su replied, "In the room." Li Xian sighed and said, "If only she could stay for a few more months." Li Yi looked at his legs, and Li Xian felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine, and he shivered. Li Yi looked at him and shook his head. "You guys go first. Wait at the city gate. I will bring her there in a while." In the room, Shawnee's foot was still wrapped in white gauze. When she saw Li Yi, she said in a low voice, "Sir." Li Yi walked to the bed and squatted with his back to her. He said, "They have gone first. I will carry you to the city gate. Wait a minute, I still have something to bring." Knowing that Mr. would carry her to the city gate, Xu Ning seemed a little happy. She hurriedly jumped off the bed, ran to the cabinet barefooted, and took out a small box. "Wait a moment, I still have something to bring." Knowing that her teacher would carry her to the city gate, Shawnee was clearly happy. She quickly jumped off the bed and ran barefoot to the side of the cupboard. She took out a small box. Li pretended not to see it, and she pretended not to see it. Li pretended not to see it. Holding the box, she ran over, put on her shoes, and lay on his back. The sloppy old man glanced at her. "Little girl, you don't have eyes." Bai Su lowered her head and didn't say anything. She and Jiang of Silla could still bicker and glare at each other, but she didn't dare to get angry at the old man in front of her. Because Jiang of Silla couldn't beat her, and even 10 of her couldn't beat this old man. Shaning's personality was lively. In the past, she would always be like a little bird chirping around him. Now that she had grown up, she always spoke softly, but she still had endless things to say. She couldn't wait to tell her all the interesting things that happened in the capital after Li Yi left the capital. For example, Li Han, who all the civil and military officials wanted to have a good relationship with, was always despised by a little girl, Duan Wu. He even used his position as the dean and threatened not to graduate to force a student from the Mathematics Institute to pass on information for him. It was all because the student's sister was Duan Wu's good friend. There was also a certain important official in the court who couldn't stand his fierce wife at home. He went to the women's union to report that his fierce wife often used violence against him. She and Li Yi had been talking about such interesting things for a few months, but there was no end to it. No matter how long the road was, there would always be an end. Li Yi didn't know how many streets and alleys he had gone through, but at some point, he arrived at the city gate. "Teacher." Shaning suddenly said. "Yes." Li Yi habitually tilted his head slightly so that he could hear more clearly. The young girl's soft lips pressed against the side of his face. Shaning jumped down from his back and waved at him. Her pretty face was full of smiles. "Goodbye, teacher." She ran into the city gate and looked back every 3 steps. Li Yi personally sent the caravan of nearly 100 people out of the city. The girl who had been waving at him for a long time on the carriage at the very front had already disappeared. He stood in place and watched for a long time until he could not even see the last shadow of the figure. Yong Ning stood beside him and held his hand. She asked, "Brother, when will royal sister come to see us again?" Li Yi thought for a while and said, "Maybe next year." Yong Ning smiled and said, "Next year, I'll be 10 years old next year. Royal sister said that when I turn 10, she'll give me a big present." Li Yi held her hand and walked into the city gate. When they walked into the city, Li Yi looked at the hot sun above his head and said, "Sinny, go back and pack your things. Tomorrow, we'll be moving to the mountains." "Okay, okay." The young girl seemed very happy. Her voice was clear. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, but his face was full of a crazy smile. "Lunatic, you lunatic." The old man looked at him and said angrily, "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you?" "Of course you don't dare." The young man supported himself against a pillar and slowly stood up. He asked mockingly, "Other than you and me, there are no males in the Yang imperial family. If you kill me, who will become the emperor, my poor sister?" From the Zhangzhou of the Wu kingdom to here, there was an extremely smooth road. The speed of information transmission was extremely fast. It could be reached in a day, and new strategies could be formulated at any time. Li Yi wrote a part of the plan and walked out to take a breath of fresh air. He saw Su leaning against a big tree, with a chicken drumstick in one hand and wine in the other. He took a bite of the chicken and drank a mouthful of wine. He still looked so sloppy, but there was a faint sense of elegance. He had the temperament of a qigong. This was the demeanor of a different grandmaster, especially when paired with the melancholy and hesitation that appeared in his eyes. Li Yi could almost be sure that this was an old man with a story. The imperial palace of the Wu kingdom. The emperor of the Wu kingdom looked at an old woman in the hall and slowly said, "As long as you help me with this matter, I will agree to any of your requests." The old woman had a head of white hair, but there were not many wrinkles on her face. Her body was not stooped at all. She looked at the young man in front of her, her expression as calm as an ancient well. You are the emperor. The young man was startled, then smiled and said, besides the emperor, who else dares to call himself emperor? I can agree to your request. The old woman looked at him and said, but before that, you must help me find someone. Who? The old woman narrowed her eyes. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes deepened. She slowly opened her mouth and her voice was cold, making people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Su Tian. Chapter 1076. Cough, cough. When Li Yi saw that Su picked up the wine pot and gulped it down, he knew that he might have choked because he had eaten too much chicken. The one who loved to eat chicken was second granduncle. In order to satisfy his craving for good food, there were 5 cooks in the family who specially made chicken for him. There were a variety of methods, including dozens of methods and over a dozen cuisines. Occasionally, they would even create new methods. Su didn't like to eat chicken in the past. He loved white rabbit creamy candies. However, he couldn't stand eating too much sugar when he was old, so he started to imitate second great uncle. Li Yi knew that Su was actually from the Wu Kingdom. For most masters, those mundane things could no longer pique their interest. They pursued higher martial arts. Most of them would choose to travel around in search of opportunities to break through again. Of course, Su's opportunities were not outside but here. Li Yi walked over and sat opposite him. He asked, White Rabbit Creamy Candies have released a new type of milk candy with low sugar content. It won't spoil your teeth. Su, do you want to try it? The sloppy old man didn't even raise his head. He said, Tell me, what do you want me to do? It was great to talk to such a straightforward person. He was straightforward and didn't beat around the bush. Li Yi thought about it and said, Su is also from the Wu Kingdom. I don't think you want to see the people of the Wu Kingdom suffer from war and live in misery. I'm not going. The sloppy old man wiped his mouth and said even more straightforwardly. Li Yi was stunned. I haven't said what it is. You want me to protect that little girl? The sloppy old man looked at him and said, I'm not going to the Wu Kingdom. It wasn't good to talk to such a straightforward person at all. The sloppy old man stood up and said, With your second young mistress and the experts on the heaven list, even a master won't be able to do anything. Moreover, the only master left in the Wu Kingdom is Yang Wanli. He's also a member of the Yang royal family. He won't do anything to that little girl. Li Yi originally thought that there was nothing to worry about in the fringe with Rui and second great uncle by his side. There were also many guards outside. Yang Liuking's trip back to the Wu Kingdom was fraught with danger. With a master by his side, he didn't have to worry too much about his safety. However, since Elder Su said so, he did not insist. After all, Elder Su was a guest, not a servant of the Li family. He thought for a while and asked curiously, could it be that the Wu Kingdom only has 2 grandmasters, Elder Su and Yang Wanli? 2. The sloppy old man waved his hand and said, 3, isn't there another one here? That's even more impossible. Anyway, don't worry, there aren't that many idle grandmasters in the Wu nation. Not to mention that some of them were experts who could fight against 10 or even dozens of experts. Even with Divine Punishment's excellent equipment, it was enough to easily deal with the elite troops of the Wu Kingdom. Of course, they had only a few people they could use to begin with. If they wanted to turn the situation around with such a small number of people, only fools would go head-on against the army of the Wu Kingdom. Yang Liuqing and the others probably still needed some time to prepare. When the first step of the plan was formulated, they would walk out of the fringe and take the first step of the revolution. Originally, he wanted to discuss with Drunken Mo about a few trendy underwear styles, but Old Man Wang came looking for him. They could only slowly talk about the underwear at night. Li Yi admired Old Man Wang very much. He was avant-garde and bold. Although he was old, he wasn't pedantic at all. This was very rare in the current era. Moreover, in the future revolution, as the former prime minister and the role model of the literati of the Wu kingdom, Old Man Wang would play a very big role. Rui and Yang Liuqing were both martial artists. It was very easy for them to carry a knife and kill people. However, if they were to talk about unifying their thinking, the united front, how to fight the land war well, how to establish and govern a base after a great victory. Not only would they have a headache, but Li Yi himself would also have a headache. Professional things should be done by professionals. These days, after Jiang of Sila's explanation, I'm suddenly enlightened. After Old Man Wang walked in, he first bowed to Li Yi. In fact, it was more than a sudden enlightenment. After talking with Li Yi for the past few days, he finally understood that there was so much to learn about rebelling. Many aspects of it were similar to governing a country through different means. He had long heard that Jiang of Silla was the best in the world and was also a famous minister in the Jing kingdom in the past. He always thought that the rumors were exaggerated. Today, after experiencing it personally, he understood that those rumors were actually not true. You're welcome. Li Yi waved his hand and said, Prime Minister Wang, is there a problem today? Old Man Wang nodded and said, Jiang of Silla should also know that the traitor who usurped the throne was insane. After killing his brother and father, he was still worried that there would be others who would threaten his throne, so he slaughtered the Yang clan with groundless charges. Li Yi nodded. He had also heard of what Emperor Wu had done. This was not only insane, it was practically antisocial and anti-human. No one would do such a thing. In this way, other than that traitor, there are no more males in the Yang clan. After Her Royal Highness ascends the throne, that traitor will definitely not be able to escape death. A trace of worry appeared on Old Man Wang's face, and he said, But after Her Royal Highness, who should this vast world be handed over to? Li Yi understood Old Man Wang's worry very well. For example, the Jing kingdom belonged to the Li family. It was fine for Li Xian or Li Han to sit, but Li Yi himself could not sit. Emperor Wu had killed all the males in the Yang clan. In the future, Empress Yang Liuqing would be bored, so she could not casually choose someone with the surname Yang to pass the throne to. Actually, what Old Man Wang said was wrong. Didn't the Yang clan still have Yang Fu? Forget it, Old Man Wang already thought he was dead. He respected the dead, so he would not mention it. However, on this matter, the Empress in the other world had already given an answer. Li Yi looked at Old Man Wang and said, What's so difficult about this? When your princess has children in the future, just pass it to her son. What flows in his body is still half Yang clan's blood, no. This was a very easy problem to solve. Let Yang Liuqing's son have the surname Yang, and then inherit the throne. Old Man Wang's thoughts were still limited, but it was already not easy for him to think of the Empress. This couldn't be circumvented, and Li Yi could understand. Although Yang Liuqing's child, in terms of bloodline, could not be compared to the orthodox Yang clan's royal family, if she became the Empress, this wouldn't be a problem. In the other world, there was still someone who wanted to pass the throne to his nephew. Old Man Wang came to a sudden realization and clasped his hands, saying, Thank you, Jiang of Silla, for dispelling my doubts. I thank you on behalf of the people of the Wu kingdom. You're welcome. Li Yi waved his hands again. The child born by Yang Liuqing would inherit the Wu kingdom, so what was there to thank him for? He couldn't help her give birth to a son. Li Yi opened his eyes and asked in confusion. Thank you for being willing to help her. I'm helping her, why are you thanking me? Mississippi Lu did not answer. Li Yi thought about it and waved his hand. He said, Actually, it's not as complicated as you think. Think about it, if your disciple becomes the Empress, you will be the Empress's teacher, and I will be the Empress's martial uncle. My seniority will be higher than the Empress's, and it will be so prestigious. Mississippi Lu paused and asked, You're doing this for this? What else could it be? Li Yi shook his head and said, "Besides, if she becomes the empress, you will be the empress's teacher. At that time, even if Mingzu really becomes the empress, won't you still be better than her?" Mississippi Lu frowned and said, "Even without this matter, I will still be better than her." There was no need for a family to be so calculative. Li Yi naturally would not mention that she had lost to Mingzhu in a duel. He shook his head and said, "Aren't I just adding flowers to brocade?" Mississippi Lu seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Since you helped Yang Liuqing to ascend the throne because you want to be the empress's martial uncle, then what did you want to do when you made Mingzu the empress?" Li Yi closed his eyes and said, "I've been talking to them for too long. I'm a little sleepy. I'm going to sleep for a while." He was actually really sleepy, but the hands on his shoulders were getting stronger and stronger, making it hard for him to fall asleep. Tsang Province. Tsang Province was located at the northwest border of the Wu Kingdom. Although it was not considered a barren land, it was too far away from the imperial capital and bordered the fringe. From time to time, bandits would come out of the mountains to wreak havoc. For hundreds of years, the people of Tsang Province had been plagued by bandits. In the past 2 years, the bandits in the fringe had been eliminated, but the lives of the people had become even more difficult. Ever since the Wu Kingdom fell into chaos a few years ago, the imperial court had lost control of Tsang Province. In the past few years, Tsang Province had changed hands several times. First, a tyrant took advantage of the chaos in the country and attacked the provincial capital. He killed the provincial governor and his assistant officials and proclaimed himself king. Of course, they were annihilated by the imperial court a few months later. After that, Tsang Province was attacked by several other tyrant forces. The imperial court retreated and retreated. 2 years ago, Princess Duanrong used her iron fist to wipe out the rebellious forces in Tsang Province. She promulgated several policies to benefit the people, allowing the people of Tsang Province to have a short period of time to recuperate. Unfortunately, good times did not last long. Just a year ago, Princess Duanrong was besieged by the imperial court and several enlistment forces. After the defeat, there was no news of her. On the surface, Tsang Province had been reclaimed by the imperial court. However, with the imperial court's military strength, they were unable to suppress the rebellious forces that took advantage of the situation in the past year. The people suffered from the rebellious forces and their lives were extremely difficult. In a village several dozen miles away from Tsang Province's capital, a white-haired village chief was kneeling on the ground, tears streaming down his aged face. He pleaded, "Lord Steward, please give us a little more time. Please give us a few more days. 2 days ago, the village was robbed and we only have this little bit of food left. If you take this food away, we won't be able to survive." A middle-aged man dressed in a satin robe glanced at him and said coldly, "It's only right and proper to pay a debt. What does it have to do with me that you were robbed? I only know that if you can't pay the rent that you are supposed to pay, the master will punish me when I return. If I give you a little more time, who will give me a little more time?" He looked at the people behind him and said, "What are you waiting for? Take all the food away." The servants carried the sacks on their backs. Among the crowd below, more than 10 men dressed in coarse clothes had grief and indignation on their faces. However, they could only stand where they were, not daring to make any sudden movements. If they made a move on these people, the ones who would come knocking on their door tomorrow would be the constables of the government. Watching as the people carried the food onto the horse carriage, the middle-aged man looked down and frowned. "You've only paid less than 30% of the rent. I'll give you half a month's time. If you still can't pay after half a month, don't blame me for being impolite." Half a month. The village chief watched as the people carried the last of the village's food away. He collapsed on the ground with lifeless eyes and muttered, "Half a month, half a month. Half a month, everyone will starve to death." He sat on the ground and pointed at the sky as he cursed, damned heaven, you're not giving us a way out. You're sending us to our deaths." None of the villagers spoke. Their eyes were empty as they stared blankly in front of them. The autumn harvest had just ended, and all the food had been robbed by the bandits. Unable to pay the rent, the master had plundered all their food. There were nearly 100 mouths in this village, and they were about to run out of food. How could they survive until the next year? This King world doesn't give us a way out at all. How good would it be if Her Royal Highness was still here? Xiao Yun, Xiao Yun. The woman's panicked voice woke everyone up and they all looked in the direction of the voice. A 7 or 8-year-old girl with messy hair and ragged clothes was lying on the ground. The woman crouched on the ground and picked up the girl, shaking her in panic. Xiao Yun, what's wrong with you? The village chief crawled up from the ground and quickly walked over. He touched the girl's forehead and shook his head. This child has been sick for a few days. Hurry up and find a doctor. If we delay any longer, she'll die. The woman's face was filled with despair. They couldn't even eat, so where would they find the money to find a doctor? She hugged the girl and cried, Xiao Yun, I'm so sorry, sister-in-law, what happened? The woman raised her head when she heard the voice beside her. She saw a young man walking over from the side of the road. The young man walked to the woman's side and crouched down. He pinched the little girl's philtrum and she slowly regained consciousness. She looked at the woman and weakly said, Mother, I'm hungry. The woman hurriedly wiped her tears and said, Mother will go find something for you to eat. The young man took out a package from his bosom. After opening it, he took out a steamed bun and handed it to the little girl. Eat something first. The little girl was startled. The next moment, she took the steamed bun and wolfed it down. The young man turned back and said to the man with a Red Cross armband standing on the side of the road, This little girl is sick. Come and take a look at her. He looked at the woman and smiled. Don't worry, he's a doctor. All of this happened very quickly. The woman was stunned for a moment before she immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the young man a few times. She loudly said, Thank you for your great kindness, thank you for your great kindness. The young man shook his head and smiled. There's no need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank the Heavenly Empress. They swore that they would take back their food. The old, the weak, the women, and the children had all stayed in the village. They stood at the entrance of the village and looked in a certain direction silently. A young child curled up in his mother's arms. He raised his head and asked, Mom, where did Dad and the others go? The woman lowered her head and said softly, Dad and the others went to find food for us. Once they find food, we won't have to starve anymore. Rui City. Li Yi looked down. Yang Luqing, Geezer Wang, Wei Liang, Chen Qing, and several deputies were all there. Even Mississippi Lu found a seat and sat at the back. He nodded, turned around, knocked on the blackboard, and said, Now, let's start the class. Today, we'll talk about the timing of a rebellion. He cleared his throat and continued, The timing of a rebellion is very important. Think about it. Has anyone in the Jing Kingdom rebelled now? No one dares to rebel in the Jing Kingdom. Why? Is it because the Jing Kingdom is strong, and the people live and work in peace and contentment? Is it because they have nothing better to do? Wei Liang nodded thoughtfully. Li Yi pointed at him and said, General Wei, answer me. Why hasn't anyone in the Qi Kingdom rebelled? Someone in the Qi Kingdom rebelled. Wei Liang thought for a while and said, A few years ago, the first prince of the Qi Kingdom was bewitched by someone. He wanted to implement the Silver of Judgment law in the Qi Kingdom. The country was in turmoil. The officials of several states rebelled. It involved many people. Later, it was forcefully suppressed. Sit down. Li Yi glared at him and said, The example of the Qi Kingdom's failed rebellion tells us that even a rebellion must be based on principles. When a country is still very strong, blindly rebelling will definitely pay a heavy price. The so-called timing of a rebellion is also the current situation. Several conditions must be met. The world is in chaos, the people have no way to make a living, the imperial court is not trustworthy, the rebels rise together. Obviously, this is the current situation of the Wu Kingdom. Later, Li found that it was not easy to change their minds with just words on paper. Old man Wang was an elite among scholars after all. But it was a bit difficult for generals like Wei Liang and Qin Qing to understand. However, they should understand these things the most. Therefore, he could only return to his old business and set up a small jiang of Silla class. He taught them for an hour every day. Judging from the effect of the lectures these days, the effect was not bad. He looked at the people below who had a look of realization on their faces and spoke again. Before a rebellion, you need to understand the main contradiction of a region. Is it the people and the government, the people and the gentry, or the people and the bandits? Only after you understand the main contradiction can you know what to do next. Only then can you gradually strengthen your troops. Zhangzhou, Dong Village. A group of old, weak women and children quietly waited at the entrance of the village until the sun was about to set. Suddenly, a loud voice shouted, "They're back! They're back!" Everyone's spirits rose. When they looked up, they saw a group of people walking over from afar. They saw their men and sons walking into the village in high spirits. Their faces were full of smiles, and each of them carried a big cloth bag on their shoulders. Chapter 1079. The villagers of the Dong family village entered the village and placed the food on their backs in an orderly manner at the village entrance. The young man walked out from the crowd and said, "This food was brought back by everyone risking their lives. Everyone can take it and divide it among yourselves." The dozens of men standing behind him revealed looks of shame as they heard this. These food were taken from the hands of bandits, but they weren't the ones who took it. They were just standing on the sidelines watching the fun, cheering and cheering. When they arrived, they were already prepared to perish together with the bandits. But after arriving, they discovered that One-Eyed Tiger's group of several dozen people wasn't even enough to fight against their benefactor. They couldn't even help. In the end, they could only help their benefactor tie up those bandits. It was unknown where those bandits were taken. The man named Dong Dahai carried several bags of food and placed them to the side. He said, "Benefactor, this is enough for us. If we take more, it will still be taken by others. You can take the rest of the food away." The young man waved his hand and said, "This is your food to begin with. We can't take it. After you take it back, hide it well and don't let others steal it." The Dong family village people lowered their heads in silence. In times of chaos and natural disasters, food was their life. The government wanted food, their families wanted food, and the bandits on the mountain also wanted food. These people wanted their lives. But today, these strangers that they didn't know treated their illness and helped them steal food from the hands of bandits without asking for anything in return. Dong Dahai was the first to kneel on the ground, knocking his head on the ground. The two men beside him looked at each other and knelt down as well. The villagers of the Dong family village knelt down one by one. Whether they were men or women, young or old, or even the ignorant children, all of them had their heads pressed down by their mothers. The young man stood in front and said, "You don't need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank the Heavenly Empress. Remember to live a good life in the future. Don't do evil and do more good deeds. The Heavenly Empress will protect you. If you disobey, we will take back everything that the Heavenly Empress has bestowed upon you." Dong Dahai respectfully said, "Benefactor, rest assured. We will not harm the Heavenly Empress merit." The villagers of the Dong family village also responded. Even after those people gradually left, the villagers were still kneeling on the ground. They looked at the piles of food around them and felt that it was unreal. Dong Dahai took out a portrait from his bosom. This was something that he had requested from his benefactors. This portrait was of the Heavenly Empress. They were only ordinary people and could not do anything for the Heavenly Empress. They could only worship the Heavenly Empress day and night in order to repay her kindness. From today onwards, not only him, but everyone in the Dong village would have to erect a long life memorial tablet for the goddess. Recently, a legend had been circulating outside Sangzhou City. The Wu Kingdom was in chaos, and the people had no way to make a living. The people suffered from the chaos of war and were homeless. The Empress took pity on the people and descended to the mortal world. She sent her believers to help the people in distress and in danger. She helped the people in Sang Prefecture to treat their illnesses for free and gave them vegetarian meals. Many people were saved. There were common people that had received their kindness and willingly joined them. They swept away the bandits that roamed Sang Prefecture and distributed the food they seized to the poor people. In a short period of time, they received the unanimous support of the local people. The Heavenly Empress had a benevolent and generous heart. She spread the word of good in the world and also guided the people of Tsang Prefecture to do good deeds and accumulate good karma. She also left behind a prophecy that not long after, a person of the mandate of heaven would appear and save the people of Tsang Prefecture from their misery. In these past years, the common people heard countless people proclaim themselves as people of the mandate of heaven. Without exception, these people were all exterminated by the imperial court. These people said that they would help the common people, but they actually stole food from the common people and went around capturing people. A long time ago, the people of Tsang Prefecture no longer had any expectations for this so-called person of the mandate of heaven. However, the Heavenly Empress was different. She never desired anything from the common people. She filled the stomachs of the common people and cured their illnesses. The common people believed in her and supported her. When she said that a person of the mandate of heaven would come and save them from their misery, many common people longed for the arrival of this person. Tsang Prefecture City, Provincial Governor's Mansion. A person of the mandate of heaven. The Tsang Prefecture's provincial governor slammed the table and said with dissatisfaction, investigate thoroughly for this official, find out who this group of people is. With such a force appearing outside of Tsang Prefecture City, as the provincial governor, he naturally could not let his guard down. The situation in Tsang Prefecture was chaotic enough. He was the provincial governor in name, but he could only do as he pleased in the prefecture city. Once he left the prefecture city, he would be restricted by those powerful people. It wasn't easy for the imperial court to take down Tsang Prefecture. If there were any unforeseen events here and a few more rebels were born, this provincial governor who hadn't been a provincial governor for long would most likely meet his end. This so-called holy religion that led people to do good must be nipped in the bud. After finishing this matter, he still had to think of a way to find Princess Duanrong's whereabouts. His Majesty had sent him several secret letters, ordering him to find Princess Duanrong at all costs. Unfortunately, the fringe was easy to enter but hard to leave. If he couldn't send troops in, where would he find her? Unless Princess Duanrong could walk out of the fringe on her own and stand before him, he didn't think such a pie falling from the sky would happen to him. In the fringe, Li Yi had just sent off Yang Liuqing and his entourage. In the end, what was learned on paper was still shallow. Rebellion was not something that could be accomplished with words alone. He had already taught them everything that needed to be taught. It was time for them to put it into practice. Tsang Prefecture was the closest to the fringe. It was a place that they had to fight for. Once they conquered and stabilized Tsang Prefecture, the fringe would become their stable support. As long as the imperial court of the Wu Kingdom hadn't swept away all the obstacles in the Wu Kingdom, they would be invincible. They had just set off today, but the arrangements in Tsang Prefecture had already begun several months ago. The holy religion wanted to establish a branch in the Wu Kingdom. Su Zheng couldn't wait to personally lead his men there. The philosophy of the holy religion had long changed to that of helping the needy. They recruited a portion of the people, wiped out the small gangs of bandits in Tsang Prefecture, and distributed all the food and belongings they obtained. Of course, they weren't doing this out of selfishness. There was a difference in the treatment between the followers of the holy religion and the common people. In just a few short months, their troops grew from less than 100 people to a terrifying number. And those bandits and tyrants were all brought into the fringe and turned into productive forces. In these 2 months, Li Yi also deeply understood why the countless rebellious bandits in history would first establish their own religion before they rebelled: a rebellious disciple, a protective master, a lunatic who only wanted to strengthen the holy religion and spread its teachings, and a group of martial arts experts who had long been trained to the point of wanting to see the world plunged into chaos. With Tsang Prefecture as the starting point, who knew how much chaos they would stir in the Wu Kingdom in the end? Li Duan ran over from afar and ran to his side. He asked, "Daddy, Daddy, have Auntie and senior sister left?" Li nodded and said, "Let's go." Chapter 1080. We haven't eaten for 3 days. Be kind and give us something to eat. Have pity on us. Outside of Zhangzhou City, in a tea house by the side of the official road, a dozen or so refugees, dressed in rags and covered in dust, were leaning against a low mud wall. They held a broken bowl in their hands and weakly repeated the same words. Zhangzhou had always been in turmoil. Some of the commoners had lost their homes and were living a difficult life. They could only flee in all directions. Refugees like this were a common sight along the official road. The tea house's waiter was annoyed by the noise. He walked over with large strides and kicked one of the people by the wall. He said angrily, "Go away, go away. Don't disturb our business." This tea house was opened by the side of the official road. Because of the bandits nearby, they hadn't opened for business for half a year. A few days ago, those bandits were taken care of by someone. They only dared to open the tea house again after observing for a long time. However, these refugees, who couldn't be chased away, were lying there like mud, affecting their business. They are all pitiful people. Why make things difficult for them? In the tea house, a man couldn't stand it anymore. He took out a few pieces of dry rations from his bag and distributed them to the refugees. He pointed in a certain direction and said, "Follow this official road and walk another 30 li forward. There is a village called Dong Village. Go there and do some work. At the very least, you will be able to make a living. It is still early, so don't delay on the road. You should arrive before the sky turns dark." "Thank you, thank you." The group of refugees immediately knelt down and kowtowed to express their gratitude. After a few kowtows, they got up and walked in the direction that the man had pointed. The waiter was happy to see this. He shook his head and went back to his work. The man also sat back down. A person sitting beside him suddenly asked in a low voice, "General Wei, it's already so late. Why isn't General Fan here yet? Did something go wrong?" Wei Liang drank a cup of tea and said, "What's the hurry? There are still 15 minutes. Blind Fan always delays things to the last moment." "Wei, I heard you bad-mouthing me from afar. I haven't seen you for more than a year and you've only gained this bit of skill." A loud voice came from outside the door. A man walked in and sat across from Wei Liang. This man was tall and mighty. One of his eyes was blind, and a knife scar ran diagonally through his eye, making him look somewhat terrifying. Behind him, there were more than 10 people on horseback. A murderous aura spread out, causing the few people in the shop to feel nervous. Wei Liang glanced at him and said lightly, "I haven't seen you for more than a year. Blind Fan, you've become more capable. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that you're a bandit from somewhere." The waiter of the tea house walked over nervously and asked in a trembling voice, "Sir, what would you like to order?" Wei Liang placed a few coins on the table and said to the one-eyed man, "Let's talk outside." The group walked out of the tea house and went down the official road. They walked straight into a forest not far away. Wei Liang stopped in his tracks. The people behind him dismounted their horses and knelt on one knee. They said loudly, "Greetings, General Wei." Wei Liang waved his hand and they immediately stood up. The one-eyed man took a step forward and asked in a deep voice, "Where's the princess?" "Her Highness has arrived at Song Prefecture." Wei Liang looked at him and said, "When we were suppressing the bandits, we heard that there was a powerful blind guy who occupied a mountain a year ago and subdued all the forces within a 30-mile radius. We guessed that it was you." The one-eyed man nodded and asked again, "The people of Tsang Prefecture are saying that His Highness King Jing was assassinated. Is this true?" Wei Liang nodded and did not deny it. The one-eyed man's expression changed. "Then His Highness," Wei Liang waved his hand. "Just treat it as if His Highness King Jing is already dead." The one-eyed man took a few steps back and said in shock, "Then even if King Jing is dead, we still have the princess." Wei Liang looked at him and said, "Do you think that Her Highness is not as good as King Jing?" The one-eyed man wanted to say something, but Wei Liang waved his hand and said, "If there's anything, we'll talk when we see the princess." Some people let go of their horses and rode with the people beside them. Wei Liang and a few of his subordinates got on their horses and rode on the official road. The group of people galloped away, kicking up a cloud of dust. In a remote village in a county in Tsang Prefecture, the horses stopped in front of the village entrance. The one-eyed man dismounted and looked into the village with an excited expression. Wei Liang looked at him and said, "Let's go." "Greetings, Her Highness." A moment later, in the courtyard of a house in the village, the one-eyed man knelt on one knee. The muscles on his face trembled and he could not control his excitement. "Get up." Yang Liuqing smiled and said, "General Fan has worked hard for the past year." After the one-eyed man stood up, he shook his head and said, "As long as Her Highness is fine, it's not hard for me." He also met a few deputy generals that he was familiar with and Prime Minister Wang. Before he had time to rest, he was pulled aside by Wei Liang. "Didn't you want to ask about His Highness King Jing?" Wei Liang looked at him and said, "Indeed, King Jing is not dead, but he can no longer support our great cause." After a moment, the one-eyed man came back to his senses. He sighed and said, "I've been worried about this for a long time, but I didn't expect that even Prime Minister Wang wouldn't be able to let King Jing walk the right path." After saying that, he looked at Wei Liang with bright eyes and asked, "What you said just now, is it true? Her Highness really plans to rise up?" Wei Liang looked at him and asked, "What do you think?" A sneer appeared on the one-eyed man's face and he said, "Except for Her Highness, I won't listen to anyone." Wei Liang nodded, but the one-eyed man looked at the thing hanging in front of his chest and asked, "What is this?" Wei Liang took the third eye given to him by Jiang of Silla and handed it to the one-eyed man. The one-eyed man held it in his hand and looked at it for a long time until Wei Liang taught him how to use it. He opened a small lid and brought it close to his eyes. He could even see the expressions of people a few hundred steps away. This is the monocular of the Jing Kingdom." He looked at Wei Liang and said in shock, "This thing is hard to buy. Where did you get it? What is this?" Wei Liang looked at him with some disdain and said, "Lend me your saber." A vigilant expression appeared on the one-eyed man's face and he asked, "What do you want my saber for?" "We are friends, but I won't give it to you. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Let me broaden my horizons." Wei Liang shook his head and said, "Don't worry, I don't want your things." Since Wei Liang said so, the one-eyed man had no choice but to untie the long saber at his waist. Wei Liang held it with one hand and pulled out the saber at his waist with the other. After a few sounds of metal clashing, a few cracks appeared on the one-eyed man's saber. Under the one-eyed man's incredulous gaze, he handed his saber to him and said, "It's just a pile of scrap metal. Don't say it's a saber. This saber is for you. Don't embarrass Her Highness when you go out." The one-eyed man held the saber in his hand tightly and looked at it carefully. He raised his head to look at Wei Liang and asked seriously, "Tell me honestly, what happened in the past year? Wei Liang smiled and said, come here, I'll show you something good. The two of them walked into a house. When they came out again, the expression on the one-eyed man's face could no longer be described as just shock. Tian Fa. He looked at Wei Liang and took a deep breath. After a long time, he asked, damn it, tell me honestly, did you guys steal these things from the Jing Kingdom? Without waiting for Wei Liang to answer, he revealed an excited expression and said, with these things, what do we have to be afraid of? There are less than 2,000 soldiers guarding Cangzhou. With your people, my people, and these Tian Fa, we can take Cangzhou by tomorrow night. Take Cangzhou. Wei Liang looked at him and asked, what happens after we take Cangzhou? Of course we keep fighting forward. The one-eyed man looked at him and said, with Tian Fa, what do we have to be afraid of? Wei Liang looked at him and suddenly asked, do you know what the main contradiction is and what the secondary contradiction is? The one-eyed man was startled. He picked his ear and asked doubtfully, what? Do you know what a unified mind is and what a united front is? Do you know how to establish a revolutionary base, how to fight the agrarian revolutionary war, how to mobilize the strength of the people, how to do diplomatic work and united front work? The one-eyed man was startled and asked, what are these? You don't know anything. You only know how to fight and kill. Wei Liang looked at him in disdain. He vented the anger that had been in his chest for a long time and asked, are you a pig? Chapter 1081. General Fan really wanted to refute Wei Liang. Wasn't war supposed to be advancing courageously? Killing enemies, breaking cities, fighting all the way to the imperial capital, breaking into the palace, taking down the dog emperor who had usurped the throne, and supporting Her Highness the Princess to ascend to the throne. He had never even heard of any contradictions, ideological battlefront, or base of operations. Precisely because he had never heard of it, he couldn't refute it. He and Wei Liang were old acquaintances. He had always thought that Wei Liang was only slightly better looking than him and had one more eye. When it came to leading troops into war, Wei Liang was no match for him. Otherwise, it would have been Wei Liang and not him who had followed the princess to the east and west. If Wei Liang was better than him in war, he wouldn't have been sent to the fringe to guard the rear. But after not seeing him for more than a year, he couldn't understand what Wei Liang was saying anymore. Not only that, but he also got his hands on so many divine weapons from God knows where. He got the monocular from the Jing Kingdom and Tianfa. If they had these 2 years ago, they wouldn't have lost Cangzhou and wouldn't have fallen to this state. Something that he didn't know must have happened in this 1 year. I'll teach you these things in the future. Wei Liang patted his shoulder and said, send a message back and tell your men to bide their time for now. Her Highness has her own ways to take over Cangzhou. In the future, you better keep your tricks to yourself. If this happened in Rui City, with your brain, you would only be able to build roads and move stones. General Fan temporarily suppressed the anger in his chest. He thought to himself that he would settle the score with Wei Liang after asking the princess about the ins and outs of the matter. A lady came in from outside and looked at the two. Miss Yang wants to discuss some matters with you. Who is this lady? Her Highness's new maid. She doesn't even call me General, she doesn't know etiquette. General Fan looked at the lady from head to toe and said, she's quite pretty, but she doesn't have a chest or a butt. What a pity. Bai Su walked in front of the two and asked Wei Liang, your friend. Wei Liang's face was solemn. Miss Bai has misunderstood. I don't know him. General Fan was stunned. He turned his head to look at him and asked, Wei, what do you mean by this? Your surname is Fan. I don't know what your surname is, and I don't know you either. Don't try to get close to me. Wei Liang waved his hand and said, I'm going to find Her Royal Highness. Miss Bai, please go ahead. With that, he strode away without looking back. Sigh. Just as General Fan said that, he suddenly shivered and felt an inexplicable chill all over his body. He turned his head and saw that the woman was looking at him. She said expressionlessly, Bai Su, do not fight with nameless people. State your name. He was startled for a moment, then he laughed, crossed his arms and said, Miss, Fan Chiao, have never hit a woman, Fan Chiao. Bai Su looked at him and nodded slightly. Fan Chiao, right? Wei Liang stepped into a courtyard, knocked on the door, and walked into the innermost room. There were a few people in the room. Yang Luqing, Elder Wang, and Qin Qing were all there. Elder Wang looked outside the door and asked, Where's General Fan? He still has some matters to attend to. Wei Liang shook his head and said, There's no point in calling him to discuss this matter. Let's talk about it later. Elder Wang nodded and said, Our current strength is not strong, so we should try not to attract the attention of the imperial court. Zhangzhou is the first step of our great undertaking, so we cannot be impatient. There are 9 counties in Zhangzhou, so we should plan 1 county at a time. Finally, we will encircle the provincial capital. We must remember what Jiang of Silla said, build high walls, accumulate grain, and slowly become king. From how to take down Zhangzhou with the least amount of effort, to how to forge Zhangzhou into an impregnable base, to how to achieve victory in the entire Wu country step by step, they had already gone through tens of hundreds of simulations and established a general plan. What they needed to do now was to implement the plan step by step. Wei Liang. Here. I order you to take down Qin County within half a month. Do you have any objections? Yes, sir. Qin Qing. Here. After an hour, Wei Liang walked out of the courtyard and walked to the front of another courtyard. He asked the guard standing at the door, Where's General Fan? The soldier swallowed his saliva and said, Inside. He walked 2 steps, then turned back and asked, Where's Miss Bai? Miss Bai left an hour ago. Wei Liang nodded and pushed the door open. He immediately saw General Fan sitting on the ground, leaning against the courtyard wall. He was covered in dust, and his eyes were listless as he looked ahead. At this moment, General Fan looked no different from the refugees he had met. He sighed and walked forward, wanting to help him up. Don't move. General Fan, who was paralyzed, suddenly shouted. 2 streams of turbid tears fell from his eyes. He sniffled and said in a sad voice, My arm is broken, crack. Wei Liang helped him reattach his arm and helped him into the room to sit down. He sighed and said, In the future, whenever you meet someone you don't know, especially a woman, you better watch your mouth. General Fan opened his mouth in disbelief. Is she really a woman? Wei Liang thought for a moment and said, I forgot to tell you just now. If you meet any woman here, don't take the initiative to provoke them. If you really fight, even Her Highness is not a match for them. General Fan nodded in hindsight and couldn't help but ask, Who are these people? It's a long story. Wei Liang shook his head and said, Too many things have happened in the past year. I'll tell you one by one. In the room, sounds of surprise could be heard. What? Plum's Art of War. You met the real person and listened to his teachings. He also gave you the Qinli mirror. Her Highness is his martial niece. He wants to help us rebel. You have a secret weapon that is even more powerful than heaven's punishment. Wei Liang enjoyed General Fan's surprised expression very much when he was telling the story. When General Fan first learned about these things, in terms of performance, he was just a little better than him. The 2 of them had followed Her Highness the Princess for a long time. Their statuses were similar and they were both generals, so it was inevitable that they would compare themselves to each other. When they met again, he felt extremely carefree when he realized that she had crushed him in all aspects. General Fan finally calmed down and looked at him and asked, Prime Minister Wang asked you to take over Qin County in half a month. Can you do it? Do you need my help? No need. Wei Liang simply waved his hand to show his refusal. Chen County was only a small county in Sangzhou. There was no army stationed in the county. Almost all the troops in Sangzhou were in the state capital. If someone broke through the state capital, these small counties would inevitably fall. Other than some strong people who served in the army and the 3 groups of officials in the county government, Chen County had no other power. Moreover, they had infiltrated each of the 9 counties in Sangzhou. Countless people were their backing, and the small groups of bandits in the country had almost been subdued by them. With the help of those martial arts masters, it was not difficult for them to take down a county. Then I'm relieved. General Fan nodded and asked again, "Oh right, that lady just now, what's her background?" Wei Liang explained, "That is Miss Bai Su. Miss Bai is a friend of Her Highness. Her martial arts are extremely high. Even Her Highness is no match for her. You have not seen Her Highness's master. Miss Liu is the real powerful one." General Fan nodded and said, "Miss Bai is beautiful and has a good figure. She looks soft and weak, but I didn't expect her to be so powerful." Wei Liang couldn't help but laugh and said, "I admit that Miss Bai is beautiful, but if you say that she has a good figure..." He patted General Fan's shoulder and said, "Old Fan, when did your other eye become blind?" "Nonsense." General Fan slapped his hand away and said, "I think Miss Bai is good in every aspect." Wei Liang waved his hand and said, "Hey, you don't understand. A woman like Miss Bai with no breasts and no buttocks will not be easy to have children. Whoever marries her will be unlucky." General Fan cupped his hands and said, "You have the guts to say that to Miss Bai. If you have the guts to say it to her face." Wei Qing glanced at him and said, "Do you think I am stupid? I only dare to say it when there is no one else here. If I say it in front of her, wouldn't I be courting death?" "You are not stupid." General Fan looked at him and said with a smile, "If you are not stupid, look back." Chapter 1082. Because General Wei was unwell, the task of taking down Qin County within half a month fell on Deputy General Qin Qing. General Fan hadn't been with them for more than a year, so he was behind in thinking and couldn't keep up with the pace of the times. Prime Minister Wang specifically told them to eat and live together in this half a month. Wei Liang's task became to help General Fan improve the quality of thinking. Ordinary soldiers just followed orders and didn't have high requirements, but as a general, he couldn't be lax in thinking. In the temporary residence, young Lu Qing sat at the table and slowly flipped through the pages of a book. She read every line of words very carefully. General Wei and General Fan only needed to know how to fight a war, but she was different. Not only did she need to know how to win the first battle, but she also needed to know how to strengthen her troops. She needed to know how to survive in the cracks when her forces were still weak. She needed to start from Sangzhou and approach the place that had given her countless nightmares step by step. She even had to think about some more distant things. One day, if she really sat on the throne, what should she do? How could she be a good emperor? She never doubted whether she could do it or not. If Uncle Master said it was possible, then it was possible. Prime Minister Wang knocked on the door and walked in. "Your Highness." After a slight salute, he said, "Qin Qing has gone to Qin County. He used to be stationed in Sangzhou, and Qin County is his hometown. Our people have already infiltrated the county government, and Envoy Su will also provide us with help. With Miss Bai's help, it shouldn't be a big problem to take down Qin County government quietly, got it?" Yang Liuqing nodded. Qin County, including the entire Sangzhou, was almost abandoned by the imperial court. Only about 1,000 soldiers were stationed in the capital of Sangzhou. She only needed to lead 50 elite soldiers to occupy Qin County government. Qin Qing had many masters on this trip, so she wasn't very worried. Prime Minister Wang looked at the open book on his table and sighed, "Your Highness has worked hard these years." Ever since the second imperial prince usurped the throne, he had watched helplessly as the defenseless girl took the young imperial prince Jing and escaped from the imperial capital. They hid all over the place and slowly grew up to become the princess that she was today. He had seen how much hardship she had suffered along the way. Yang Liuqing shook his head and said with a smile, "It's the Prime Minister who's tired. You're already so old, but you still have to run around with us. It's us who've dragged you down." Prime Minister Wang waved his hand and said, "I'm tired, but I'm willing to be tired. If I can see the day your highness ascends to the throne, I'm willing to die of exhaustion." Yang Liuqing smiled and discussed some matters with him before saying, "I'll go and see master." Prime Minister Wang watched her walk out. He caught a glimpse of the elegant handwriting on the open page on his desk, and his gaze slightly paused. He looked outside the door. The princess from 2 years ago was very different from the one she was now. 2 years ago, although she had also tried her best to fight and work very hard, she was confused and had no direction at that time. Now, she would no longer show that kind of confusion and helplessness. There was someone who pointed the way for her, the way for all of them. When Yang Liuqing walked into the next room, Mississippi Lu was looking at the autumn water in a daze. "Master." She walked over and said softly. Mississippi Lu came back to her senses and asked, "Bai Su and the others have left?" Yang Liuqing nodded and said, "They just left with General Qin." She looked at Mississippi Lu and said, "Master, there's nothing to do here for the time being. Why don't you go back to Rui City first? Bai Su and the others are here. Nothing will happen." Mississippi Lu waved her hand and said, "No need. There's nothing important to do when I go back." "What does he want you to do next?" "Let me see the plan." Not long after, Yang Liuqing walked out of the room and came to the courtyard. He looked into the distance and saw a stretch of mountains. Although there was nothing important there were important people there. It was just that master was never willing to face them. It had been 5 years since the second year of Jing He. If time went back, it would be even longer. It had been so long that even as a disciple, she was worried for her. Zhangzhou, Qin County, the county government. It was late, but the county magistrate of Qin County was still flipping through the files in the front hall of the county government. Recently, Qin County had not been peaceful. Of course, Qin County had never been peaceful. When the Wu Kingdom was still in peace, there were mountain bandits here. Now that the Wu Kingdom was in chaos, there were less mountain bandits here, but now there was a rebellion. Those sons of Cheese who could not defeat the regular army of the imperial court did not dare to provoke the prefectural city where the army was stationed. Instead, they targeted the soft persimmon like the county government. His predecessor, the predecessor before him, and the predecessor before him, were all hacked to death by the mountain bandits who rushed into the county government. Ever since the country was in chaos, there were people rebelling in all the prefectures. A place like Zhangzhou, which was already chaotic, naturally became even more chaotic. Every once in a while, a few dozen or nearly 100 thugs would rush into the county government and hack down the county magistrate and a few low-ranking officials. Chapter 1084. Li Yi and Li Duan were not the only ones who came to Zhangzhou. In order to strengthen the cohesion of the holy religion, Ruoqing, as the incarnation of the Empress, couldn't always exist in the portrait. She had to show up in front of the believers. This time, Rui and Zui Mo didn't come with them. Rui had to stay in Rui City to preside over the overall situation. Li Mu was still young and hadn't weaned yet, so Zui Mo couldn't leave. Without a grandmaster following them, they couldn't guarantee their safety in extreme situations. Even if Su didn't want to come to the Wu Kingdom, he followed them to Zhangzhou this time. "What are you doing here?" Mississippi Lu looked at him and asked. Based on her understanding of Duaner, it was impossible for him to miss her. "Duaner said he missed you." "Of course, this is only one of the reasons." Li Yi looked at Li Duan, who hid far away after calling him aunt, and said, "There's nothing to do in the mountains, so I took him out to see the world and see your progress. Tsangzhou hasn't been conquered yet, right?" Mississippi Lu said, "We'll conquer the city in 3 days. There are still 3 days. There's no hurry." Li nodded, thought for a moment, and said, "Dwayner just said he was hungry. Why don't you cook a bowl of noodles for him first? If it's convenient, cook a bowl for me too, with more vegetables and more noodles." Whether Li Duan wanted to see Rui for the food she cooked or not, as a father, Li Yi couldn't refuse a reasonable request from a child. He also wanted to see with his own eyes what the current situation in Tsangzhou was like. After the meal, they walked through the village. Yang Luqing explained to him, "We've taken down the 7 county governments in recent days. We've also used some means to control the officials in the county governments. Some of the strong people can be used by us in a short period of time. Now, only the prefectural city is left." It had been several months since they split up and quietly came to Tsangzhou. In addition, before this, Su Zheng had already brought people here to expand the number of believers. Their progress was not fast. However, this was also Li Yi's intention. To the Wu Kingdom, Tsang Prefecture was a remote place, but Tsang Prefecture was close to the fringe. As long as the Wu Kingdom could defend Tsang Prefecture, no matter how strong the enemy was, they would be able to receive endless reinforcements from the fringe. This was a place that had to be fought for. They had to hold it firmly in their hands and not simply occupy the government office. Otherwise, they would easily end up in the same situation as they did 2 years ago. The remaining snow had yet to dissipate. Walking on the road, one could see many villagers busily working in the village, constructing some strangely shaped buildings. This was a brothel that was about to be built. Any commoner who had a hard time living nearby would come here to work. "She governs the country better than men, so why can't the emperor of my Wu Kingdom be a woman?" The passerby was startled and asked in surprise, "Is there really such a thing? Why would I lie to you?" The man carrying the logs pretended to be profound and said, "If one person says it's false, then 100 or 1,000 people say it. How can it be false? I have to explain it to you." Not far away, a steward looked over and shouted, "You too, what are you doing? Have you finished moving the logs? Do you want to eat or not? If you don't want to move, there are still others." The man shivered and immediately said, I'm coming. Don't move. Don't touch my logs. If anyone touches my logs, I'll fight them." The passerby was startled for a long time. He looked at a young man passing by and asked, "What he said just now, was it all true?" Li nodded and said, "It's not just that. When Princess Duan Rong was born, beautiful stars appeared and auspicious clouds appeared. The Phoenix Cry imperial capital was filled with the emperor's aura. At that time, a wandering Taoist who passed by the imperial palace said that this was the fate of the emperor. A person with this kind of fate would definitely become the emperor in the future." Only when the passerby walked away in a daze did General Fan rub his head and say with some surprise, "When Her Highness was born, I was standing guard at the city gates. At that time, there was no phoenix, nor was there any fragrance. As for those beautiful stars and auspicious clouds, that's even more nonsense. Who was the one who spread those rumors? To dare spread rumors about the princess, I'll skin them alive." Wei Liang, who had just returned, looked at him and finally couldn't help but say, "Old Fan, why don't you stop leading the troops and supervise those people moving the logs? That job is easy and doesn't need to use your brain. It's very suitable for you." The one-eyed general was startled and asked, "What do you mean?" Yang Liuqing blushed a little. Although she knew the purpose of the brothel spreading these rumors, she still felt a little embarrassed in front of so many people. Li Yi looked at her and comforted her, "These are all nothing. In the past, there was a shameless fellow who said that he wasn't human and that he would transform into a dragon when he encountered a storm. Those who achieved great things did not bother with trifles. He didn't say that when she was born, the word empress was written on her palm. That was already very restrained. To become an emperor, one must first learn to be shameless. She didn't know how shamelessly Xian was as an emperor. He even needed someone to help manage the country. Let's not think about this for now. He looked at Yang Liuqing and said, after we take down Cangzhou, we'll be busy for a period of time, Cangzhou's capital. The provincial governor of Cangzhou sneezed and rubbed his nose. He asked, have you investigated the matter that I asked you to investigate? Below, a low-ranking official nodded and said, reporting to Lord, I've investigated everything. That holy religion is nothing more than a group of self-proclaimed chivalrous people. They help the commoners to suppress bandits and distribute food everywhere. They say that they want to punish the powerful and help the people. In troubled times, there were many chivalrous people who lacked a single thought. It was fine as long as they didn't rebel. The provincial governor of Cangzhou relaxed and said, I understand. You can leave. This lowly official takes his leave. The low-ranking official bowed and left. The provincial governor of Cangzhou couldn't help but sneeze again. He rubbed his nose and mumbled, I didn't catch a cold last night. He stood up. For some reason, he had an ominous premonition in his heart. The low-ranking official walked out of the room and into the courtyard. When he brushed past two bailiffs, he raised his hand slightly and extended 3 fingers. Chapter 1085. Early in the morning, the sky was already bright. There weren't many pedestrians on the bumpy and uneven streets of Cangzhou. Cangzhou wasn't a large state to begin with and didn't have a large population. In the past 2 years, because of the increasing bandits and wars, the entire city was half empty. Some people had died, some had fled to other places. The people that remained in Cangzhou were either unable to leave their homeland or had no relatives to go to. Rather than saying they were living in Cangzhou, it was more like they were fighting against the heavens. At a vegetable stall on the side of the street, a woman stopped in her tracks. Carrying a basket, she picked through the vegetables and asked, how much are you selling these radishes? The stall owner sat on the stone steps and raised his head. 2 copper coins per caddy. 2 copper coins. The woman in coarse clothing frowned and said, it was 1 copper coin yesterday. The stall owner glanced at her and lightly said, yesterday, the officials only charged 5 copper coins for blocking the road. Today, they're charging 10 copper coins. The price of 1 caddy of radishes had doubled. What should have been a month's expenditure would now be used up in half a month. The woman angrily picked up her basket and said, I'll look at other vendors. She walked 1 round on the street and when she returned, her expression had completely collapsed. This isn't drinking blood and eating meat. They're smashing their bones and swallowing them. These days are almost unbearable. Who said it wasn't? The vegetable vendor finally sighed and said, when Cangzhou was occupied by those rebels, the people were the ones who suffered. Now that Cangzhou has been taken back by the government, the people are still the ones who suffer. When will these bitter days come to an end? The woman thought about it and said, that might not be bad. 2 years ago, when Princess Duanrong was in Cangzhou, everything was quite good. Sigh, what a pity. The stall owner seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, I heard 2 days ago that Her Highness is going to fight back. The woman put down her basket and said mysteriously, I also heard that Princess Duanrong has been fated to be an emperor since she was young. Just like the princess of the neighboring Jing kingdom, she will become an empress in the future. The two of them talked mysteriously for a while. The stall owner waved his hand and said, Sister-in-law, I see that you and I get along quite well. This is all fate. How about this, I'll sell this dish to you at the same price as yesterday. That's good. The woman smiled and said, today, I have to pick a little more. She picked a whole basket of vegetables and handed it to the stall owner, saying, weigh it. After the stall owner weighed it, he said, that's a total of 22 copper coins. I'll round it up and give you 20 copper coins. The woman took out her pouch, counted the copper coins, and handed them over to him, saying, "You count them." The stall owner smiled, kicked the money into his pocket, and said, "You don't have to count." "Are you going to lie to me, sister-in-law? All right then, I'll go back first." The woman waved her hand at him. When the stall owner saw her disappear, he immediately put the money back into his pocket and counted again. It did not matter even if he paid 2 copper coins less, because the price of the vegetables was originally 20 copper coins. He added a small change and wiped off another small change. After counting it twice and looking at the 18 copper coins in his hand, the stall owner fell into deep thought. He sighed. The moral degeneration of the world was getting worse day by day, and people's hearts were no longer what they used to be. The simple and honest customs of Tsangzhou had been ruined by these people. At this moment, a man who was walking while tightening his belt walked over and asked, "Old Wang, did anyone come to buy vegetables just now?" The young stall owner kicked the money into his pocket, stood up, and waved his hand. He said, "No, but a sister-in-law came. She took a long time to pick vegetables, but she thought it was too expensive and didn't buy any more. Sigh, I don't want to raise the price either, but if I don't, I'll have to hand all the money for these vegetables to the government." Say, why can't they learn from the past Princess Duanrong? The man sighed, looked at him, and said gratefully, "I ate something bad yesterday. Thank you for helping me look after my stall. You're welcome." The young man stood up, waved his hand, and said, "It's nothing." After the young man left, the man counted with his fingers and murmured, "Today is a good day." He cleaned up the vegetable stall early, returned home, and told his wife and children to look after the house well. He walked out of the house, walked around a few streets, and when he arrived in front of the door of a deep residence, he lightly knocked on the door 3 times, and said in a low voice, "Jing Ku assassinates the king of Qin." The door opened, and he walked in, closing it on the way. In the spacious courtyard in front, there were already dozens of people gathered together. Another hour passed, and from time to time, people would come in from outside. At some point, someone counted the number of people. Everyone stood in an orderly manner in the courtyard, and a young man walked out from inside. Everyone bowed and said, "Greetings, Envoy Su. No need to be so polite." The young man waved his hand, and said, "I won't say much nonsense. The guards outside the city are obstructing us. Tonight, our mission is to attack the provincial governor's manor. Our people are already prepared inside the provincial governor's manor. You must remember, we are different from those rebels. After attacking the provincial governor's manor, you are not allowed to rob or kill. If there is a violation, you will be punished according to the sect rules." "Yes." Everyone answered in unison. In the provincial governor's manor, for some reason, the Tsangzhou provincial governor kept feeling uneasy tonight. The sky had already darkened. He walked out of the hall and into the courtyard, pacing back and forth anxiously. A figure walked into the courtyard from outside and walked to his side, asking with concern, "Darren, what's wrong?" The Tsangzhou provincial governor looked at the advisor beside him and asked, "Is there still no news of Princess Duanrong?" These days, he had not paid attention to the rumors regarding Princess Duanrong in Tsangzhou City. However, the rumors had spread like wildfire, and the entire city was in an uproar. He finally started to feel uneasy. When the advisor heard this, he smiled and said, "Darren is worrying too much. These things are just the product of those ignorant people's groundless accusations and extreme exaggerations. Could it be that Darren also thinks that Princess Duanrong can become the emperor?" When the Tsangzhou provincial governor heard this, he felt slightly more at ease. He thought and then said, "There are no waves without wind. The groundless accusations also have their roots. We cannot let down our guard. Have the city guard strengthen the defenses these days?" The advisor nodded and said, "Yes, I'll go make the arrangements now." Also, send people to put up Princess Duanrong's portrait. Put up more outside the provincial city as well. Anyone who discovers any clues will be rewarded with 1,000 taels of silver. Understood. The Zhangzhou provincial governor waved his hand and said, "All right, go make the arrangements." Seeing the advisor leave, he stroked his beard. He did not want to stay in a place like Zhangzhou for another moment. If he could capture Princess Duanrong, what awaited him would be a bright future. The advisor walked out of the courtyard and brought 2 bailiffs to the gates of the provincial governor's manor. He said to the people guarding the gates, "The provincial governor has orders to step up the patrols these few days. There are not enough people in the city defense. You guys should go as well. Leave this place to the 2 of them." The people did not suspect anything. After respectfully replying, they immediately left. At the same time, the Zhangzhou provincial governor returned to the hall. When he saw the sudden appearance of a few people, his footsteps paused. A young lady at the very front looked at him and asked, "You were looking for me?" After being startled for a moment, the Zhangzhou provincial governor's expression changed drastically. He immediately turned and left the hall. At this moment, the provincial governor's manor was already in chaos. Outside the city, flames soared into the sky, and there were faint sounds like thunder. Chapter 1086. The Zhangzhou provincial governor stood in the courtyard. When he saw several figures walking out of the hall, his legs went soft, and he collapsed to the ground. General Wei, General Qin, Duke, Princess, he finally realized where that ominous premonition in his heart these past few days came from. They fought back again. The provincial governor's manor was already in chaos. Those rebels rushed in. No, they didn't seem like rebels. They were organized and disciplined. They didn't smash or rob. They only controlled the bailiffs and officials of the provincial governor's manor. There were only several dozen bailiffs in the provincial governor's manor. In front of these several hundred people, they didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Very soon, the noisy provincial governor's manor calmed down. A long time had passed, but there was still no movement from the 2,000 soldiers responsible for the security of the provincial governor's manor. The Zhangzhou provincial governor raised his head and looked outside. The place where the flames were soaring into the sky was the direction of the barracks. The only explanation was that when the provincial governor's manor was attacked, they were also attacked, and they couldn't even protect themselves. That deafening thunder and flames made him involuntarily recall the tragic scene of corpses strewn all over the Thorns Ridge that night. His entire body trembled like a sieve. Everyone in the provincial governor's manor gathered in one place. Chen Qing walked over and waved his hand, saying, "Take them away first." Attacking the provincial governor's manor was not difficult at all. The people guarding the gates were their own people, and they had long since familiarized themselves with the terrain and defenses inside. The strong citizens lying in ambush around the provincial governor's manor could catch them off guard in an instant. Wei Liang walked to the entrance of the manor and asked in a loud voice, "How is the situation outside the city?" In the distance, General Fan laughed heartily as he dismounted from his horse and said, "There's heavenly punishment, divine weapons, and 2 captains on our side. Furthermore, there's a surprise attack, working together from the inside and outside. If we still can't win this kind of battle, old Fan, we'll cut off my own head and let you sit on it." He strode in front of Yang Liuqing, knelt on one knee, and said loudly, "Reporting to your highness, I have captured all of Zhangzhou's 2,000 soldiers. Our side has suffered 23 casualties, no serious injuries, and no deaths. In a battle of this level, it was already a miracle that only 20 or so people were lightly injured." The man called Zhang Depeo grinned and said, "Capture me. Hee, you don't know who was the one who tied the rope on the provincial governor's body yesterday?" The man opened the door wider and asked doubtfully, "What does this have to do with you? Could it be that you were the one who tied the rope?" To tell you the truth, the rope on the provincial governor's body yesterday was tied by a brother beside me. Jean de Peo said with some regret, sigh, if I wasn't busy tying up another dog official yesterday, this good thing would have fallen on my head. What do you mean? The man walked out of the house and looked at Jean de Peo. He asked in astonishment, could it be that you also participated in the rebellion? Who was the one who fought their way in last night? What rebellion? Jean de Peo waved his hand and said unhappily, let me tell you, the one who rebelled was the current dog emperor. He killed my father and big brother. We followed Her Highness to quell the rebellion. If you don't know anything, don't talk nonsense. What did you say? The man was stunned and asked, you said that the one who fought their way in last night was Her Highness? Princess Duan Rong is back. Jean de Peo nodded and said, that's right. Otherwise, why would I put up this thing early in the morning when I had nothing to do? The man looked at the notice and asked, what does it say? I don't know what it says. Jean de Peo scratched his head and said, but I heard that Her Highness wants to recruit people to repair the city walls. Meals will be provided and money will be provided. If they follow Her Highness to quell the rebellion, participate in the revolution, and make contributions, they will be given land when they return. While the man was stunned, Jean de Peo stuffed a stack of notices into his hands and said, don't just stand there. If you have nothing to do, help me put up these. I'll treat you to lunch at noon. At this moment, in the streets and alleys of Tsangzhou City, someone held a large paper tube in his hand and walked through the streets, shouting all the way. Recruiting, recruiting. Repairing the city walls at the south gate. 10 copper coins a day. Wages will be paid daily. 2 meals will be provided. Those who are interested can go to the government office to sign up. The number of people is limited. First come, first served. Recruiting, recruiting. Her Highness is recruiting. Join the army today, get your pay tomorrow, and you will be given land in the future. The commoners hid in their homes. They couldn't see the notice, but they could understand the human language. They were shocked. The one who fought their way into the city last night was Princess Duan Rong. Her Highness was back. Everyone said that the person with the mandate of heaven was coming. Could it be Her Highness? Yes, it must be. When Princess Duan Rong was born, she was protected by a phoenix.